The morning sun had barely risen over the small village of Liling when Maylene awoke with a start. She had been dreaming of her mother again, not the frail, bedridden woman who now occupied the bed across the room, but the strong, vibrant woman who had once taught her how to weave baskets from river reeds and brew medicine from wild herbs. Maylene rubbed her eyes and glanced at her mother. Even in the soft morning light, she could see how thin her mother had become. Her cheeks, once full and rosy, now sank inward, and her skin had taken on a yellowish tint that frightened Maylene more than she cared to admit. "Water," her mother whispered, her voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. Maylene hurried to pour water from the clay jug beside the bed. She gently lifted her mother's head and held the cup to her lips. Most of the water dribbled down her chin, but Maylene patiently wiped it away with the edge of her sleeve. "Thank you, daughter," her mother said, attempting a smile that broke Maylene's heart. 3 months ago, her mother had been the one caring for others in the village. People came from all around seeking her remedies for everything from fevers to broken bones. Now she could barely lift her head from the pillow. Outside, the village was coming to life. Maylene could hear the familiar sounds of morning, chickens clucking, children laughing, the rhythmic chopping of wood. Life went on, even as it seemed to be slipping away inside their small home. "I must get to the market," Maylene said, tucking the thin blanket around her mother's shoulders. "Old Wang said he might have some ginseng today. It will help with your strength." Her mother's eyes fluttered closed. "Save your coins, child. We've tried everything." "Don't talk like that," Maylene said sharply, then immediately regretted her tone. "I'm sorry, Mother. I can't give up." At the market, Maylene moved from stall to stall, her eyes scanning for anything that might help. She had already spent most of their savings on medicines and healers. None had done more than ease her mother's pain for a day or two before the illness returned, stronger than before. "Maylin," a voice called out. It was Li Wei, the son of the village headman. His family's stall was filled with vegetables from their large garden. "How is your mother today?" Maylin appreciated that he asked. Many villagers now avoided the subject altogether, as if her mother's illness might somehow spread through mere conversation. "The same," she replied, fingering the few coins in her pocket. "Do you have any ginger root? The tea sometimes helps her sleep." Li Wei selected a plump root and wrapped it in a scrap of cloth. "Take it," he said, pushing away her outstretched hand with the coins. "No charge." Maylin felt the familiar burn of tears but blinked them back. "Thank you," she said simply. Pity was a bitter thing to swallow, but she could no longer afford pride. As she turned to leave, she overheard 2 older women talking in hushed tones by the rice seller's stall. "Poor girl," one said. "Soon she'll be all alone in the world." "It's the way of things," the other replied with a shrug. "At least she's of marrying age. Perhaps the headman's son will take her in out of kindness." Maylin quickened her pace, cheeks burning. She would not become an object of charity. She would find a way to save her mother no matter what it took. At the edge of the market, where the sellers of herbs and medicines set up their stalls, Maylin spotted old Wang. His wrinkled face brightened when he saw her. "Ah, the dutiful daughter returns," he said, gesturing to his meager display of dried plants and roots. "I'm sorry, child. No ginseng today." Maylin's shoulders slumped. "Nothing new?" "Nothing we haven't tried." Old Wang hesitated, then motioned for her to come closer. "There is something," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "Not here in the market, but I've heard stories." "What stories?" Maylin leaned in, hope flickering in her chest like a fragile flame. "There's a healer in the mountain pass beyond the North Forest, an old woman who knows the ancient ways." He glanced around nervously. "They say she has cured the uncurable. Why haven't you mentioned this before?" Maylin demanded, perhaps too loudly, for several nearby shoppers turned to look. Old Wang shook his head. "Because the journey is dangerous, especially for a young woman alone. Wild animals, steep cliffs, bandits sometimes. And the healer. Some say she's not entirely human, that she asks for strange payments." "I don't care about dangers or strange payments," Maylin said firmly. "Tell me how to find her." That evening, as Maylin fed her mother a thin soup made with the gifted ginger, she debated whether to share what she had learned. The journey would take at least 3 days each way. Her mother had never been left alone for so long. "You're planning something," her mother said suddenly, surprising Maylin with her alertness. "I can see it in your eyes." Maylin set down the soup bowl. There had never been secrets between them before the illness. She would not start now. I heard about a healer in the mountains, she said. Someone who might be able to help when others couldn't. Her mother sighed. The mountain witch? Those are old stories, Maylin. You've heard of her too? When I was a girl, my grandmother spoke of her. But no one I know has ever actually found her. She reached out with a trembling hand to touch Maylin's cheek. The mountains are not safe. I have to try, Maylin insisted. What else can I do? Just watch you fade away day by day. You could accept what cannot be changed, her mother said gently. All things have their season, daughter. Even people. No, Maylin said, standing up so abruptly that the soup bowl clattered to the floor. I won't accept it. I'm going to find this healer. The next morning, before dawn, Maylin packed a small bag with dried meat, hard bread, a water skin, and the remaining coins wrapped in a cloth. She had arranged for the neighbor woman to check on her mother twice daily. It wasn't ideal, but it was the best she could manage. Her mother was awake when Maylin came to say goodbye, her eyes clearer than they had been in weeks. You're really going then, she said. It wasn't a question. Maylin nodded, kneeling beside the bed. I'll be back as soon as I can. With help. If you must go, then take this. Her mother slowly pulled a jade pendant from around her neck, the one treasured possession she had never sold, even when they needed money most desperately. It protected me in my younger days. Perhaps it will do the same for you. Maylin took the pendant, feeling its smooth weight in her palm. I can't take this. You can and you will, her mother interrupted with a flash of her old firmness. A mother protects her child however she can. She closed Maylin's fingers around the pendant. And when you reach the crossroads in the forest, take the left path, not the right. How did you know there would be a crossroads? Her mother smiled mysteriously. There's always a crossroads, child. In every journey that matters. The eastern sky was just beginning to lighten when Maylin slipped out of the village. She followed the well-worn path until it narrowed and began to climb into the foothills. By midday, the village was far behind her, and she had entered the dense forest that covered the lower slopes of the mountain. The forest was alive with sounds, birds calling, insects humming, leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. Under different circumstances, Maylin might have found it beautiful. Now each sound made her jump. Imagining wild animals or the bandits old Wang had mentioned, she fingered the jade pendant hanging around her neck, drawing comfort from its smooth surface and the knowledge that it had once belonged to her mother. When the path split at a massive oak tree, just as her mother had predicted, Maylin hesitated. The right path looked well-traveled and relatively safe. The left was overgrown, dark, and uninviting. She remembered her mother's words and, taking a deep breath, turned left. The path grew steeper and rockier as the afternoon wore on. Maylin's legs ached and her breath came in short gasps. She had never ventured this far from the village before. What if old Wang was wrong? What if she was risking everything on nothing more than a story told to entertain children? As dusk approached, Maylin found a small clearing beside a stream. She drank deeply from the cold water and made a simple camp, gathering fallen branches to build a small fire. The flames offered little comfort as darkness fell completely and the forest filled with night sounds, strange calls and rustlings that set her nerves on edge. She thought of her mother, alone in their small house, growing weaker with each passing day. Maylin clutched the jade pendant and whispered a promise to the night. I will find help. I will not return empty-handed. In the flickering firelight, she could almost believe that the journey ahead would lead to salvation rather than disappointment. With that thought, she wrapped herself in her thin blanket and closed her eyes, listening to the crackle of the fire and the whisper of the wind through the trees, carrying her toward tomorrow and whatever it might bring. Maylin woke to the sound of birdsong. For a moment, she forgot where she was. The leafy canopy above her was not the familiar wooden beams of her home, and the hard ground beneath her was not her sleeping mat. Then reality rushed back. Her mother's illness, the journey, the mountain healer who might be their last hope. She sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her back. The fire had died during the night, leaving only cold ashes. A thin mist hung between the trees, giving the forest an otherworldly appearance. Maylin shivered, not just from the morning chill. After a breakfast of dried meat and a handful of berries she'd gathered near the stream, Maylin continued her journey. The path grew steeper and narrower as it wound up the mountainside. In some places, it nearly disappeared altogether, forcing her to guess which way to go. Twice she had to backtrack after reaching impassable rocky outcrops. By midday, the forest had thinned, replaced by scrubby bushes and stunted trees that clung to the rocky soil. The wind was stronger here, whistling through the stones and tugging at her clothes. Maylin pulled her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders and pressed on. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, Maylin spotted a column of smoke rising from a cluster of rocks ahead. Her heart leaped. Could it be the healer's dwelling? She quickened her pace, ignoring the burning in her legs and the blisters forming on her feet. The smoke led her to a small clearing where 3 men sat around a campfire. They looked up as she approached, their expression shifting from surprise to something that made Maylin's stomach tighten with unease. "Well, well," said the largest of the men, rising to his feet. "What brings a young woman all the way up here all alone?" Maylin took a step back. These were not friendly travelers. The way they looked at her, the knives visible at their belts, these were the bandits old Wang had warned her about. "I'm just passing through," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "On my way to visit my uncle who lives in the next valley." The man laughed, revealing teeth stained brown from chewing tobacco leaves. "There's no village in the next valley, girl. Just rocks and wild goats." He took a step toward her. "Why don't you join us for dinner? We have plenty to share." Maylin glanced between the 3 men, calculating her chances of outrunning them. Slim to none, she decided. But perhaps she could outsmart them. "Actually," she said, forcing a smile, "I'm looking for someone who might be able to help you. I'm seeking the mountain healer, the old woman who lives near here. They say she can cure any ailment." The men exchanged glances. The mention of the healer had clearly struck a chord. "The witch, you mean?" said a thin man with a scar running from his eye to his chin. "What business do you have with her?" "My mother is very ill," Maylin replied honestly. "I've come to ask for the healer's help." The third man, who had remained silent until now, spat into the fire. "Save yourself the trouble. The old woman's powers come with a price no one wants to pay." "What kind of price?" Maylin asked, momentarily forgetting her dangerous situation in her eagerness to learn more about the healer. The large man shrugged. "Different for everyone, they say, but always something you can't afford to lose." He studied her face. "You really don't know where she lives, do you?" Maylin shook her head. To her surprise, the man pointed to a narrow path leading up between 2 large boulders. "Follow that trail until you reach a waterfall. Her hut is just beyond it." His expression softened slightly. "But heed my warning, girl. Whatever she asks of you, walk away. Some prices are too high, no matter how desperate you are." Maylin nodded her thanks, hardly believing her luck. She backed away slowly, then turned and hurried up the indicated path before the men could change their minds. The path was barely visible, more like a game trail than a route used by humans. It wound between massive boulders and along the edge of steep drops that made Maylin's head spin when she looked down. The wind grew stronger as she climbed higher, carrying the distant sound of falling water. By the time she reached the waterfall, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. The waterfall itself was not large, just a narrow stream tumbling down a rocky face about twice Maylin's height. But the pool it formed glowed with an unnatural blue light in the fading day. Maylin paused, suddenly uncertain. What if the bandits had sent her into a trap? Or what if the stories about the healer were just that? Stories? She touched her mother's jade pendant for reassurance, then steeled herself and continued around the pool. Just as the men had said, a small hut stood in a protected hollow beyond the waterfall. It was built of stone and timber, with a thatched roof from which curls of smoke escaped. A small garden grew alongside it, filled with plants Maylin had never seen before. Flowers with petals that seemed to glow in the twilight. Herbs with leaves that shifted color as the breeze moved them. Before Maylin could approach the door, it swung open. A woman stood in the doorway, so old that her face was a map of wrinkles, yet her eyes were bright and clear as a young girl's. Her white hair hung loose around her shoulders, and she wore a simple blue robe that seemed to shimmer in the failing light. "I've been waiting for you," the old woman said, her voice surprisingly strong. Maylin blinked in surprise. "You have? The stones told me someone was coming, someone with a heavy heart." The old woman stepped back from the doorway. "Come inside, child. The night grows cold and you have traveled far." The interior of the hut was larger than it appeared from outside. A fire burned in a stone hearth, filling the single room with warmth and the scent of herbs. Bundles of dried plants hung from the rafters, and shelves lined the walls crowded with jars, bottles, and strange objects Mei Lin couldn't identify. "Sit," the old woman said, gesturing to a low stool near the fire. "Eat. Then we will speak of why you have come." She placed a bowl of steaming soup and a chunk of dark bread in Mei Lin's hands. The soup smelled wonderful after days of dried meat and hard bread. Mei Lin hesitated only a moment before hunger overcame caution, and she began to eat. The old woman watched her silently, those bright eyes missing nothing. When Mei Lin had finished the last drop of soup, the healer took the empty bowl and set it aside. "Now," she said, settling on a stool across from Mei Lin, "tell me about your mother." Mei Lin started. "How did you know I came about my mother?" The old woman smiled, revealing teeth as white as her hair. "You wear her pendant, and you have her eyes." She leaned forward. "Tell me." So Mei Lin told her everything, how her mother had fallen ill months ago, how her strength had faded day by day, how all the village remedies and medicines had failed to help. As she spoke, tears she had been holding back for months finally spilled down her cheeks. The old woman listened without interruption. When Mei Lin finished, she rose and moved to one of the shelves, running her fingers over various jars and pouches. "Can you help her?" Mei Lin asked, wiping away her tears with the back of her hand. "Perhaps," the old woman said, "but first I must know if you understand what you're asking." She turned to face Mei Lin. "Healing is not simple, child. It is not just herbs and poultices. True healing requires balance. What is taken must be given back. What is broken in one place must be mended in another." Mei Lin frowned. "I don't understand." "No," the healer sighed. "Few do until it's too late." She selected a small pouch from the shelf and returned to her stool. "I will help your mother, but there is a price." "I have coins," Mei Lin said quickly, reaching for the cloth-wrapped bundle in her pocket. The old woman waved away the offering. "I have no use for metal discs. The price is not for me, but for the balance of things." She opened the pouch and tipped something into her palm. "This is my payment." In her wrinkled hand lay a simple gray stone, smooth and round as if shaped by years in a riverbed. It looked utterly ordinary, the kind of stone a child might pick up to skip across water. A stone? Mei Lin couldn't keep the disappointment from her voice. She had expected some rare herb, some magical potion, not a common rock. "Not just any stone," the healer corrected. "This stone has been waiting for you. It will heal your mother, but first it must heal you." Mei Lin stared at the stone, then at the old woman's face, trying to determine if this was some kind of joke or test. The healer's expression remained serious. "I don't understand," Mei Lin said again. "I'm not sickened, aren't you?" The old woman's eyes seemed to look straight through her. "Your body may be strong, but what of your spirit? What of the fear that keeps you awake at night? The anger you hold inside? The grief already taking root in your heart?" Mei Lin felt exposed, as if the old woman had peeled back her skin to examine what lay beneath. "How will a stone heal any of that?" "That," said the healer, pressing the stone into Mei Lin's palm and closing her fingers around it, "is what you must discover for yourself. Take it to your mother. When you understand its purpose, when it has healed what is broken in you, only then will it heal her." The stone was warm against Mei Lin's skin, as if it had been lying in the sun rather than in a pouch in a dim hut. She wanted to protest, to demand a real cure, not riddles and rocks, but something in the old woman's gaze stopped her. "There must be more to it than that," Mei Lin insisted. "Some instructions, some ritual?" The healer smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her ancient face. "The stone knows what to do. Trust it. Trust yourself." She rose from her stool, signaling that the conversation was over. "You may sleep here tonight. The journey down the mountain is no place for darkness." As Mei Lin laid out her thin blanket near the fire, questions tumbled through her mind. Was this stone truly magical? Or had she risked everything for nothing? The bandit's warning echoed in her thoughts. The old woman's powers come with a price no one wants to pay. What price was she paying? And would it be worth it to save her mother? With the stone clutched tightly in her hand, Mei Lin eventually drifted into an uneasy sleep, filled with dreams of falling water and her mother's face, sometimes smiling, sometimes still as death. Mei Lin woke to the smell of herbs and wood smoke. For a moment she thought she was back in her own home, with her mother brewing tea at the hearth. Then she opened her eyes and remembered the mountain, the healer, the stone. She sat up quickly, checking her palm where she'd held it as she fell asleep. It was still there, ordinary and gray in the morning light filtering through the hut's single window. The old woman was nowhere to be seen. A small pot of what looked like porridge sat near the banked fire, still warm. Beside it lay a cloth bundle that hadn't been there the night before. Maylin ate quickly, aware that she needed to start her journey home. Every day away meant another day her mother grew weaker. When she finished, she examined the cloth bundle. Inside were dried fruits, nuts, a small loaf of dense bread, and a tiny pouch of tea leaves. A gift for the journey home. Outside, the morning was clear and cool. Maylin looked around for the healer, wanting to thank her for the food and shelter, but the old woman was still absent. Only the sound of the waterfall and the wind in the stunted trees broke the mountain silence. With a sigh, Maylin tucked the stone into her pocket, shouldered her bag with the food bundle inside, and began her descent. The path seemed easier to follow in daylight, though no less steep. She moved cautiously, mindful of loose rocks and drop-offs. She half expected to encounter the bandits again at their campsite, but when she reached the clearing, no one was there. Only cold ashes and trampled grass showed where they had been. The journey down took less time than the climb up. By late afternoon of the second day, Maylin could see the forest that surrounded her village in the distance. She pushed on, though her legs ached and her feet were blistered, determined to reach home before nightfall. The sun was setting when she finally emerged from the forest path onto the main road that led to the village. Relief flooded through her at the sight of familiar fields and houses ahead. She had made it back safely. Now she just had to hope the stone would do what the healer promised. As she approached the first houses, Maylin noticed something odd. There were more people in the streets than usual for this time of day. They stood in small groups talking in low voices. Some were crying. A terrible fear gripped her heart. Had something happened to her mother while she was gone? She broke into a run, ignoring her exhaustion and the curious stares of the villagers. When she reached her own small house, she found the door standing open. Inside, several women from the village stood around her mother's bed. Among them was the headman's wife, who was placing a cloth over her mother's face. "No," Maylin cried, pushing through the women to reach the bed. "No, I'm back." "I found help." The headman's wife turned, her face softening with pity when she saw Maylin. "Child, I'm so sorry. We tried to make her comfortable. She asked for you at the end." Maylin sank to her knees beside the bed and pulled back the cloth. Her mother's face was peaceful, as if she were merely sleeping. But there was no rise and fall of her chest, no flutter of breath from her lips. "When?" Maylin whispered. "Just now," one of the other women said gently. "Only moments ago." "If you had been here, leave us," Maylin said, her voice strange and hollow in her own ears. "Please." The women exchanged glances, then quietly filed out of the house, murmuring words of sympathy that Maylin barely heard. When they were gone, she collapsed across her mother's body, finally allowing the tears to come. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I tried. I climbed the mountain. I found the healer." She pulled the stone from her pocket and placed it in her mother's cold hand, curling the lifeless fingers around it. "She said this would heal you. She said it would help." For a long time, Maylin lay there, her tears soaking the thin blanket that covered her mother. Outside, darkness fell completely. The sounds of the village quieted as people returned to their homes. Still, Maylin didn't move. What had it all been for? The dangerous journey, the encounter with the bandits, the strange meeting with the healer, all for nothing. She had returned with nothing more than a worthless rock and promises that turned to dust. A soft knock at the door finally roused her. She sat up, wiping her face with her sleeve, and called out for whoever it was to enter. Li Wei, the headman's son, stepped into the small house. In his hands he held a covered dish. "My mother sent food," he said awkwardly, setting the dish on the small table. "And I wanted to see if you needed anything." Maylin shook her head. What she needed, no one could give her. Li Wei shifted uncomfortably, then noticed the stone in her mother's hand. "What's that?" Maylin gave a bitter laugh. "A cure. Or so I was told." "A cure?" Li Wei moved closer to examine the stone. "From where?" "The mountain healer," Maylin said, too numb with grief to care how foolish it sounded. "I climbed the mountain to find her. She gave me this stone and said it would heal my mother, but first it had to heal me." She shook her head. "Nonsense. just a trick played on a desperate daughter. To her surprise, Li Wei didn't laugh or offer pitying looks. Instead, he sat down beside her on the edge of the bed. The mountain healer, he repeated thoughtfully. My grandfather spoke of her. He said she was as old as the mountain itself and that her cures always worked, though rarely in the way people expected. He glanced at Mei Lin. What exactly did she tell you? Mei Lin recounted her meeting with the old woman, the cryptic words about healing herself first, the inexplicable warmth of the stone. As she spoke, she realized she was still clutching her mother's hand with the stone between their palms. Maybe she meant it would heal your grief, Li Wei suggested. Not prevent your mother's death, but help you afterward. Mei Lin pulled her hand away, letting the stone roll onto the blanket. Then she should have said so. I would never have left my mother's side if I'd known. If I'd known these were her last days. Li Wei was silent for a moment. Then he said, The whole village is talking about your journey. They say you're either very brave or very foolish to have gone alone into the mountains. Foolish, Mei Lin said flatly. Definitely foolish. I disagree. Li Wei's voice was gentle but firm. It was brave. Your mother would have been proud. His kindness threatened to break through the numbness that had settled over Mei Lin's heart. She turned away, afraid that if she began crying again, she might never stop. You should rest, Li Wei said, standing up. Tomorrow will be difficult, the burial preparations, the ceremony. He hesitated. My parents say you should stay with us afterward, until you decide what to do next. Mei Lin nodded, not trusting herself to speak. When Li Wei had gone, she moved to close the door behind him. As she turned back to face the small house, now emptier than it had ever been, she noticed something odd. The stone that had fallen onto the blanket was glowing. Faintly in the darkness, Mei Lin approached cautiously. The soft light pulsed like a heartbeat, growing stronger and then fading only to strengthen again. She reached out and touched it with one finger. It was warm, just as it had been in the healer's hut. With trembling hands, she picked it up. The glow didn't fade. If anything, it grew brighter, casting weird shadows around the small room. What are you? She whispered to the stone. There was no answer, of course. Just the steady pulse of light, like a tiny star captured in rock. Mei Lin sat on the edge of the bed, cradling the stone in her palms, watching its gentle radiance. She must have dozed off. For the next thing she knew, sunlight was streaming through the window, and someone was knocking loudly at the door. The stone in her hands had returned to its ordinary gray appearance. The day passed in a blur. Village women came to help prepare her mother's body for burial. The village carpenter brought a simple wooden coffin. The headman himself visited to express his condolences and to discuss the ceremony, which would take place at sunset. Through it all, Mei Lin moved like a sleepwalker, doing what was asked of her, speaking when spoken to, but feeling detached from everything around her. The only thing that seemed real was the weight of the stone in her pocket. As the sun began to set, the village gathered at the burial ground on a small hill overlooking the rice fields. Mei Lin stood beside the open grave as the village elder spoke words meant to comfort the living and guide the dead. She heard little of it. When it came time to lower the coffin into the ground, Mei Lin found herself unable to watch. She turned away, her hand unconsciously seeking the stone in her pocket. To her shock, it was warm again, almost hot to the touch. She pulled it out, half expecting to see it glowing as it had the night before. In the fading daylight, it looked ordinary, but the heat it gave off was undeniable. Are you all right? Li Wei had appeared at her side, concern etched on his face. The stone, Mei Lin said, holding it out to him. Feel it. Li Wei took the stone, then immediately dropped it with a startled exclamation. It burned me. Several people turned to look at them. The elder paused in his recitation. Mei Lin quickly picked up the stone, which felt merely warm to her touch, not burning hot. I'm sorry, she murmured to the crowd. Please continue. The ceremony resumed, but Mei Lin noticed several people whispering and casting suspicious glances her way. By the time the grave was filled and the final prayers said, the whispers had spread throughout the gathering. As the villagers began to disperse in the gathering darkness, the headman approached Mei Lin, his expression grave. There is talk, he said without preamble, that you brought something unnatural back from the mountain, something that burned my son's hand. Mei Lin clutched the stone tightly in her fist. It's just a stone? From the mountain healer. The headman's eyes narrowed. The witch, you mean? Did you make some bargain with her? Some deal that might bring harm to our village?
No, Mei Lin protested.
She gave me this stone to heal my mother, that's all. Your mother is dead, the headman said bluntly. Whatever power that stone has, it did not save her. I know that, Mei Lin whispered, the grief she'd been holding at bay threatening to overwhelm her again. The headman sighed, his expression softening slightly. I do not wish to add to your suffering, child. But the people are afraid of what they do not understand. Perhaps it would be best if you got rid of that thing. Throw it away. Return to normal life. Mei Lin looked down at the stone in her hand. Normal life? There was no such thing anymore. Not without her mother. I can't, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I don't know why, but I can't throw it away. Not yet. The headman shook his head. Then I fear you will find little welcome in the village for a time. He turned and walked away, leaving Mei Lin alone beside her mother's grave as night fell around her. The days following her mother's funeral were the loneliest of Mei Lin's life. The village, once a place of comfort and familiarity, now felt like foreign territory. People who had known her since birth crossed the street to avoid her. Mothers pulled their children away when she approached. Even the merchants at the market served her quickly and without meeting her eyes, as if afraid her misfortune might be catching. Only Li Wei and his family showed her any kindness. True to their word, they had offered Mei Lin a place to stay, a small room at the back of their house, but she had declined. The thought of leaving her home, the last place filled with memories of her mother, was unbearable. They'll forget soon enough, Li Wei told her one evening as he brought a basket of vegetables from his family's garden. He had taken to checking on her daily, despite his father's clear disapproval. Some new gossip will come along and no one will remember the stone. But Mei Lin wasn't so sure. The stone had become the center of her existence, a mystery she couldn't solve but couldn't abandon. Each night it glowed beside her sleeping mat. Each day she carried it with her, feeling its warmth against her skin. Sometimes when she was alone and her grief threatened to drown her, she would hold it in both hands and find herself calmed by its steady pulse of heat. What was it? What did it want from her? The healer's words echoed in her mind. It will heal your mother, but first, it must heal you. 1 week after the funeral, as Mei Lin was returning from drawing water at the village well, a task she now did at dawn to avoid the stares and whispers, she encountered old Zhao, the village medicine man. He stood blocking her path, his narrow face set in lines of disapproval. So, he said without greeting, you sought help from the mountain witch. Mei Lin tightened her grip on the water bucket. I sought help for my mother, and instead brought back something unclean. His eyes flicked to the bulge in her pocket where the stone rested. The headman says it burned his son. It didn't burn me, Mei Lin said, trying to step around him. Old Zhao moved to block her way again. Of course not. You've been marked by the witch, chosen to bring her influence into our village. He leaned closer, his breath sour with herbs. What did you promise her in return? What price did you agree to pay? Nothing, Mei Lin protested. She asked for nothing. Impossible. The mountain witch always demands payment. He held out his hand. Give me the stone. I will cleanse it of whatever dark power it holds. Mei Lin took a step back, one hand instinctively covering her pocket. No, foolish girl. Do you want to be cast out? To live alone on the mountainside like the witch herself? His voice dropped to a near whisper. Give me the stone and I'll tell everyone it was harmless. Just a pebble with no powers. You can return to your place in the village. Mei Lin stared at him, suddenly understanding. Old Zhao wasn't concerned about dark powers. He was worried about his own position. If people believed she had brought back a truly magical stone, his status as the village's only healer would be threatened. It's mine, she said firmly. The healer gave it to me, not to you. Old Zhao's face darkened with anger. Then on your head be the consequences. He pushed past her roughly, causing water to slosh from her bucket onto the dusty path. That night, Mei Lin couldn't sleep. Old Zhao's threat hung in the air like the smell of smoke before a fire is spotted. What consequences had he meant? And why did she feel such a strong need to protect the stone, even at the cost of her place in the village? She rolled onto her side, looking at the stone where it sat on the small table beside her sleeping mat. In the darkness, its glow was more pronounced than ever, casting soft light across the room. What do you want from me? She whispered to it. As if in response, the stone's light pulsed more strongly. Malin sat up, watching in fascination as the glow brightened, then dimmed, then brightened again, like someone breathing or a heart beating. On impulse, she reached out and picked up the stone. It was warm as always, but not uncomfortably so. She cradled it in both hands, feeling its smooth surface against her palms. "The healer said you would heal my mother," she told it softly. "But you didn't, you couldn't, and now she's gone and I'm alone and the village thinks I've brought back something dangerous." Tears welled in her eyes. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I should throw you away." The stone seemed to pulse more rapidly in her hands, almost as if it were alarmed. Malin gave a watery laugh at the absurd thought. Stones didn't have feelings. They couldn't be alarmed or happy or sad. Yet as she held it, something strange happened. The warmth from the stone seemed to spread up her arms across her shoulders and into her chest. It settled there, a comforting heat that somehow eased the tight knot of grief that had lived inside her since her mother's death. For the first time since returning to find her mother gone, Malin felt she could breathe fully. The crushing weight of loss lifted just enough to allow her to fill her lungs completely. As she sat there breathing deeply, holding the glowing stone, Malin found herself remembering not the final days of her mother's illness, but earlier times, her mother teaching her to weave baskets by the river, laughing as they gathered herbs in the forest, singing old songs as they worked together in their small garden. The memories came without the sharp edge of pain they had carried before. Instead, they brought a bittersweet comfort, like the warmth of the stone itself. Malin didn't realize she was crying until she felt tears dropping onto her hands. But these weren't the harsh, choking sobs of recent days. These tears fell gently, releasing something within her that had been wound too tight for too long. She cried until she had no more tears, all the while holding the stone, its light steady and reassuring in the darkness. When at last the tears stopped, she felt emptied out. Not in the hollow way of despair, but in the clean way of a vessel waiting to be filled with something new. "Is this what you wanted?" she asked the stone softly. "For me to remember her with love instead of just pain?" The stone's glow pulsed once, brightly, then settled back to its steady rhythm. Malin wiped her face with her sleeve and lay back down, the stone still clutched in her hand. For the first time since her mother's death, she fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. She woke to pounding on her door. Sunlight streamed through the window, telling her she had slept far later than usual. The stone in her hand had returned to its ordinary gray appearance, though it still felt warm to the touch. The pounding came again, more insistent. Malin tucked the stone into her pocket and went to open the door. Li Wei stood there, his face tense with worry. "You need to come quickly. There's a village meeting. About you." "About me?" Malin stepped outside, blinking in the bright morning light. "What do you mean?" "Old Zhao has been talking, telling people the stone you brought back is dangerous, that it contains dark magic that could harm the village." Li Wei glanced around nervously. "He's convinced my father to call a meeting to decide what to do." "What to do about what?" Malin asked, though she already knew the answer. "Whether you should be allowed to stay in the village while you possess the stone," Li Wei said grimly. "Come on, we need to hurry. The meeting has already started." They jogged through the village to the open area in front of the headman's house where public meetings were held. A crowd had gathered, with the headman and the village elders seated on stools at the front. Old Zhao stood beside them, addressing the assembled villagers. "Brings darkness into our midst," he was saying as Mei Lin and Li Wei arrived at the edge of the crowd. "I have consulted the ancient texts. Stones that glow with an inner light are not natural. They are vessels for spirits, often harmful ones." Murmurs ran through the crowd. Mei Lin felt the weight of dozens of stares as people turned to look at her. The stone in her pocket seemed to grow warmer in response. "What evidence do you have that this stone poses any threat to the village?" It was Li Wei's mother who spoke, rising from her place among the elders. As the headman's wife, her words carried weight. "Has anyone been harmed? Has any crop failed or animal sickened since it arrived?" Old Zhao's mouth tightened. "The harm may not be visible yet. Such things work slowly, poisoning the spirit of a place before the body. Or perhaps," said Li Wei's mother, "you fear that someone else in the village might possess healing knowledge to rival your own." A few people laughed nervously at this, quickly silenced by Old Zhao's glare. "The girl went to the mountain witch," he insisted. "Everyone knows the witch's gifts always come with a price the whole village may end up paying." "Let me see this dangerous stone," said the oldest of the village elders. a tiny woman with a back bent from decades of work in the rice fields. Her eyes, though clouded with cataracts, missed little. The crowd parted to allow Mei Lin to approach the elders. She hesitated, then drew the stone from her pocket and held it out on her open palm. In the bright morning sunlight, it looked particularly ordinary, just a smooth, gray river stone that might be found in any stream bed. The old woman leaned forward, squinting at it. She said, reaching out a gnarled finger to touch it. It feels warm. Warmer than it should be, sitting in a pocket. She looked up at Mei Lin. They say it glows at night? Mei Lin nodded. Yes, elder. And it helped me last night. Helped me remember my mother with love instead of just grief. The old woman's eyes softened. Ah, and that frightens our medicine man more than any dark spirit could. She straightened as much as her bent spine would allow. I see no threat in this stone. If it brings comfort to a daughter who has lost her mother, let her keep it. But the burning, old Zhao protested. It burned the headman's son. All eyes turned to Li Wei, who shifted uncomfortably. It felt hot when I touched it, he admitted. But it left no mark. He held out his hands to show unmarred skin. And Mei Lin can hold it without harm. Because she is marked by the witch, old Zhao insisted. Because he was interrupted by a cry from the crowd. A small child, no more than 4 or 5 years old, had broken away from his mother and was running toward Mei Lin. Before anyone could stop him, he reached out and touched the stone in her hand. Pretty, he said, smiling up at Mei Lin. Warm. A collective gasp went up from the crowd. The child's mother rushed forward to snatch him away, checking his hand anxiously for burns or marks. There were none. It didn't hurt him, someone murmured. The boy touched it and is fine, said another. Old Zhao's face had gone red with frustration. One instance proves nothing. The stone harms no one, the old woman elder interrupted firmly. Unless you count a medicine man's pride. She looked around at the gathered villagers. I see no reason this girl should not keep what was given to her. No reason she should not remain among us as she has her whole life. The headman looked uncomfortable, caught between his medicine man and his wife and the oldest elder. Finally, he cleared his throat. Perhaps we have been hasty in our judgment, if the stone has caused no harm. He glanced at his son, then at the small boy who had touched the stone, then at Mei Lin herself. You may keep it, and your place in the village. Relief washed over Mei Lin. She hadn't realized until that moment how afraid she had been of being cast out, of losing the only home she had ever known on top of losing her mother. As the crowd began to disperse, some looking relieved, others disappointed at the lack of drama, and old Zhao stalking away with a face like thunder. Mei Lin closed her fingers around the stone. It pulsed once with warmth, as if in acknowledgement. Thank you, she whispered to it. The village meeting marked a turning point for Mei Lin. Though some people still regarded her with suspicion, most returned to treating her as they always had, with the quiet respect due to a dutiful daughter who had lost her only family. Life settled into a new pattern, different from before but no longer unbearable. Each morning Mei Lin tended her small garden, growing vegetables and the herbs her mother had taught her to use. Each afternoon she worked at her loom, weaving the baskets that had been her mother's specialty and which she now sold at the market. And each evening she sat with the stone, watching it glow and pulse with its mysterious light. As the weeks passed, Mei Lin noticed subtle changes in herself. The sharp edge of grief had softened into something gentler, a sweet sadness that no longer threatened to tear her apart. She found herself able to speak of her mother without tears, to tell stories of her wisdom and kindness to anyone who would listen. And people did listen. First just a few, women from the village who needed herbs for minor ailments and stayed to chat. Then more, parents bringing children with scrapes and bruises asking if Mei Lin knew what poultice her mother would have recommended. Old Zhao still served as the village's primary healer, but increasingly, people came to Mei Lin for the simpler remedies her mother had been known for. The stone remained her constant companion. Though it no longer glowed as brightly as it once had, it still warmed at her touch and pulsed with light in the darkness. Mei Lin had come to think of it almost as a friend, silent but somehow aware, a presence that kept loneliness at bay. One evening, as summer gave way to autumn and the harvest season approached, Mei Lin sat outside her door watching the sunset. The stone lay in her lap, absorbing the last rays of daylight. She had taken to talking to it, telling it about her day, her thoughts, her memories. It never answered, of course, but she found comfort in the ritual. "I helped deliver the Zhang family's baby today," she told the stone, running her fingers over its smooth surface. "A healthy boy. They wanted to pay me, but I wouldn't take their money. It felt right to help the way Mother would have." The stone warmed beneath her touch, a familiar sensation now. Maylin smiled. "I think I understand now what the healer meant about you healing me first," she continued softly. "The pain isn't gone. I still miss her every day, but it's different now. I can carry it without breaking." The sound of approaching footsteps made her look up. Li Wei was coming up the path to her house, a bundle in his arms. Over the past months, he had become a frequent visitor, bringing news from the village or simply sitting with her in companionable silence as the evening faded into night. "I brought mooncakes," he said, setting the bundle on the small table beside her. "My mother made them for tomorrow's festival." The Mid-Autumn Festival Maylin had almost forgotten. In the past, it had been one of her favorite celebrations, a time when the whole village gathered to gaze at the full moon, share sweet cakes, and tell stories late into the night. This would be her first festival without her mother. "Thank you," she said, unwrapping the bundle to reveal the round, golden cakes imprinted with intricate patterns. They looked delicious. Li Wei sat beside her on the bench. "Will you come tomorrow? To the festival?" Maylin hesitated. She had avoided large gatherings since her mother's death, finding the noise and bustle overwhelming, but perhaps it was time to rejoin the rhythms of village life more fully. "Yes," she decided aloud. "I think I will." Li Wei smiled, clearly pleased. "Good. It wouldn't be the same without you." He glanced at the stone in her lap. "How is your friend today?" It had become a joke between them, the way Maylin treated the stone as a living thing. Li Wei didn't fully understand her attachment to it, but he never mocked her for it, as some others might have. "Quiet," Maylin replied, turning the stone over in her hands. "Not as warm as usual." Li Wei leaned closer to examine it. "It does seem different, less alive somehow," Maylin frowned. Now that he mentioned it, the stone did seem changed. For days, perhaps weeks, its glow had been dimming, its warmth fading. She had been so caught up in her work and the gradual rebuilding of her life that she hadn't paid close attention. "Maybe it's completed its task," Li Wei suggested. "The healer said it would heal you, and it has, hasn't it? You're different from the angry, grieving girl who came back from the mountain." Maylin considered this. It was true, she had changed. The crushing weight of loss had lifted. She had found purpose in continuing her mother's work of healing, in keeping her memory alive through stories and traditions. Was that why the stone's power seemed to be fading? "But the healer also said it would heal my mother," she reminded him. "And it didn't, it couldn't." Li Wei was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What if she didn't mean it would cure your mother's illness? What if she meant something else?" "Like what?" "My mother is dead. Beyond healing. Not her body," Li Wei agreed. "But perhaps her memory, her legacy, the pain her loss caused you?" He shrugged. The old woman on the mountain spoke in riddles. Maybe this was another one. Maylin stared at the stone, turning Li Wei's words over in her mind. Could that be it? Had she misunderstood the healer's meaning all along? Before she could reply, a commotion erupted from the far end of the village, shouts and cries of alarm. Li Wei jumped to his feet. "Fire!" someone yelled in the distance. "Fire at the granary!" The granary, where the village stored the rice harvest that would see them through the winter. If it burned, many would go hungry in the cold months ahead. Without a word, Li Wei took off running toward the shouts. After a moment's hesitation, Maylin slipped the stone into her pocket and followed. The scene at the granary was chaos. Flames licked up the side of the wooden structure, feeding on the dry timber and the straw roof. A chain of villagers passed buckets of water from the well, but the fire was spreading too quickly for their efforts to make much difference. As Maylin watched in horror, a terrible cry went up. "There are children inside." A group of children had been playing hide-and-seek in the granary, strictly forbidden but a tempting place for games. Now smoke poured from the doorway, and the adults were holding back a frantic mother who tried to rush in after them. Without thinking, Maylin pushed through the crowd. The stone in her pocket burned hot against her leg, hotter than it had in weeks. "Maylin, no." Li Wei grabbed her arm. "It's too dangerous." She pulled free of his grasp. I have to try. Before anyone could stop her, Mei Lin pulled her sleeve over her face and plunged into the smoke-filled doorway. Inside, the heat was overwhelming. Flames crawled up the walls and across the ceiling, dropping burning debris onto the stored grain. Smoke stung her eyes and scratched at her throat. "Where are you?" she called, coughing. "Children, answer me." A faint cry came from the back corner, where large baskets of rice were stacked high. Mei Lin fought her way toward the sound, ducking under a falling beam. In the corner, huddled together, were 3 small children, the oldest no more than 8. Their faces were streaked with soot, their eyes wide with terror. "Come," Mei Lin said, reaching for them. "Quickly." The youngest, a little girl of perhaps 4, was frozen with fear, unable to move. Mei Lin scooped her up, urging the other 2 to follow closely. "Stay low," she instructed. "Cover your mouths if you can." The way back to the door seemed longer, the air thicker with smoke. One of the children stumbled, and Mei Lin paused to help him up, acutely aware that every second counted. A cracking sound from above made her look up in horror. A burning section of the roof was giving way, about to crash down on them. Instinctively, Mei Lin reached into her pocket and pulled out the stone. It was glowing brighter than she had ever seen it, pulsing with light that somehow cut through the smoke and shadow. "Please," she whispered to it. "Help us." As the roof collapsed, Mei Lin threw herself over the children, holding the stone high above her head. She expected pain, crushing weight, the end of everything. Instead, there was a flash of brilliant light and a sensation of intense heat that somehow didn't burn. Mei Lin opened her eyes to see the burning timber suspended in midair above them, held back by a dome of soft pulsing light that emanated from the stone. The children gasped. Mei Lin didn't waste the moment of protection. "Run!" she told them, pushing them toward the door, still visible as a gray square in the black smoke. Now, the 3 children scrambled forward. Mei Lin followed, still holding the glowing stone aloft. The dome of light moved with her, keeping the worst of the fire at bay. They burst out of the doorway into the cool night air, coughing and gasping. Waiting villagers rushed forward to grab the children, pulling them to safety. Someone seized Mei Lin's arm, dragging her further from the burning building. "The stone," Li Wei's voice said near her ear. "Look at the stone." Mei Lin looked down at her hand. The stone was glowing with an almost unbearable brightness, its light pulsing faster and faster. It was hot in her palm, though somehow the heat didn't harm her skin. As the entire village watched in amazement, cracks appeared in the stone's surface. Light poured from these fissures, brighter and brighter, until Mei Lin had to close her eyes against the glare. When she opened them again, the stone was gone. In its place, a small pile of fine sparkling dust lay in her palm like ground-up stars. A hush fell over the crowd. Even the crackling of the fire seemed to quiet for a moment. "It saved us," one of the children said, breaking the silence. "The light stopped the roof from falling on us." Murmurs rippled through the gathered villagers. Old Zhao pushed his way to the front, staring at the dust in Mei Lin's hand with an expression of grudging wonder. "It gave the last of its power to save them," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "A worthy end." Mei Lin felt tears sliding down her soot-stained cheeks. The stone was gone, her companion, her comfort, the last link to her journey and the mountain healer. But as she looked at the 3 children, alive and safe in their parents' arms, she understood at last what the healer had meant. The stone had healed her. Yes, helped her find her way through grief to a place where she could remember her mother with love instead of just pain. And in healing her, it had also healed her, mother in the only way that mattered now, by allowing her legacy of caring and healing to continue. Through her daughter, the final act of saving the children was the stone's gift to them. Both. "Thank you," she whispered to the glittering dust, knowing the wind would soon carry it away. "Thank you for everything." Li Wei put his arm around her shoulders. "Are you all right?" Mei Lin nodded, watching as the last of the dust slipped between her fingers and was gone. "Yes," she said softly. "I think I finally am." In the days that followed, the story of how Mei Lin saved the children with the help of a magical stone spread throughout the village and beyond. Some believed it, some didn't. Old Zhao publicly declared it a manifestation of the protective spirits that watched over the village conveniently, forgetting his earlier claims about dark magic and curses. Mei Lin neither confirmed nor denied the more fantastic elements of the tale. She simply continued her work, tending her garden, weaving her baskets, offering the healing knowledge her mother had passed down to her. When children asked her about the mountain healer and the stone that glowed, she told them that true magic wasn't found in objects but in the human heart, in courage, compassion, and love. And on quiet evenings, when the memory of her mother felt particularly close, Meilin would sometimes imagine she felt a familiar warmth in her palm, as if the stone's essence had somehow become a part of her. Perhaps in a way it had. After all, the most powerful healing is the kind that changes us from within, the kind that teaches us to carry our losses without being broken by them, to transform pain into purpose, and to pass on the best parts of those we've loved to the world around us. That, Meilin decided, was the real magic the mountain healer had given her. And unlike the stone, it would never turn to dust.